question about your early days. In 1970, we said we want to bring on.
God, it sounds so old when you say, like to talk about your early days. Yes, Mickey.
Sal, you know you still look great.
Thanks, honey.
At 78 years old, Eleanor Hayes had nothing left to protect. For decades, she had been known as America's favorite television daughter. She grew up on camera beside legendary director Martin Keller, a man the world admired for his powerful films about love, justice, and family. They met when she was just 19, starring together in a groundbreaking television show that shaped a generation. On screen, they argued, laughed, and cried like a real father and daughter. Off-screen, something just as strong formed between them. They celebrated holidays together. Their families blended over the years. They watched each other grow older. So when news broke that Martin Keller and his wife had died inside their own home under violent circumstances, the industry released the usual polished statements. "We are heartbroken. We ask for privacy." A great loss to cinema. But Eleanor stayed silent. For 3 weeks, she said nothing. Then one afternoon, she sat down in front of a single camera, without makeup, without a script, and told the world that the story being whispered was only half the truth. Her hands trembled as she spoke. She said Martin had been afraid long before that final night. She said the tragedy was not sudden. It had been building for years. She said love can sometimes blind a parent to danger. And most shocking of all, she said the person Martin feared most was his own son. The room where she gave the interview was quiet, but her words echoed loudly across social media. Fans were confused. Some were angry. Others felt something deeper, a slow realization that fame does not protect anyone from private pain. Eleanor did not speak with hatred. She spoke with sorrow. She explained that Martin was not weak. He was a father. And fathers, especially loving ones, sometimes choose hope over reality. She described how the once confident director had changed in the last year of his life. He canceled dinners. He stopped attending award events. He rarely left the house. When she asked him why, he would smile gently and say, "Family matters come first." Now she believes those words carried more weight than she understood at the time. The public saw a powerful filmmaker. She saw a tired man trying to save his child. And according to Eleanor, that effort cost him everything. As Eleanor continued speaking that day, her voice became steadier, but the sadness in her eyes did not fade. She explained that Martin's son, Daniel Keller, had struggled for many years. When Daniel was young, he was bright and charming. He grew up surrounded by cameras, movie sets, and famous faces. People often said how lucky he was. But Eleanor said that luck is not always a blessing. Growing up in a famous household can create pressure that few people understand. Daniel felt the weight of expectations everywhere he went. In school, teachers treated him differently. Other students either admired him or resented him. As he became a teenager, he began pulling away from his family. At first, it looked like normal rebellion. He stayed out late. He argued with his parents. He skipped classes. Martin and his wife, Laura, believed it was just a phase. They believed love and patience would guide him back. But the phase never ended. Instead, it grew darker. Daniel began experimenting with drugs. What started as occasional use slowly turned into dependency. Eleanor said Martin once confessed to her during a quiet lunch that addiction feels like watching someone drown while standing on the shore. You want to jump in and save them, but they push you away. He told her that every time he thought Daniel was improving, something would happen, a relapse, a bad group of friends, a sudden demand for money. Laura tried to stay strong. She researched treatment centers. She attended support groups for parents. She read books about tough love and boundaries. But when it came time to enforce those boundaries, her heart would break. According to Eleanor, the real struggle inside that home was not anger. It was guilt. Martin blamed himself for working long hours when Daniel was young. Laura blamed herself for being too protective. They both wondered if they had missed warning signs. Over time, the financial strain became serious. Daniel borrowed large amounts of money. Some of it was for treatment. Some of it, they later discovered, had gone elsewhere. Eleanor described a dinner at the Keller house about 6 months before the tragedy. The house, once filled with music and laughter, felt tense. Daniel barely spoke. Martin kept checking his phone. Laura looked exhausted. At one point, Daniel left the table abruptly after a small disagreement. The sound of a door slamming echoed through the hallway. Eleanor remembered the silence that followed. She said Martin tried to smile and change the subject, but his hands were shaking. Later that night, when she was leaving, he walked her to her car and said quietly, "I don't know how to reach him anymore." That sentence haunted her after his death. She now believes that Martin felt trapped between protecting his son and protecting his wife. The public saw headlines about a successful director. They saw red carpets and interviews. But inside the Keller home, there was fear, confusion, and constant tension. Eleanor said the most painful part was watching two loving parents slowly lose control of a situation they desperately wanted to fix. And as the months passed, that tension only grew heavier. And the months before the tragedy, the atmosphere inside the Keller home became even more fragile. Eleanor explained that Martin had started withdrawing from almost everyone, not because he no longer cared about his friends, but because he was embarrassed. He did not want the world to see that his family life was falling apart. Fame creates an illusion of perfection. People expect strong public figures to have strong private lives. Martin had spent decades telling stories about courage and justice through his films. Admitting that he was afraid inside his own house felt like a personal failure to him. Eleanor said she noticed the change most clearly during what would become their final lunch together. It was held at a quiet restaurant they had visited for years. In the past, Martin would laugh loudly, talk about new projects, and debate politics with passion. But that afternoon, he seemed distracted. He kept glancing at his phone. Every vibration made him tense. Eleanor finally asked him directly if everything was all right at home. He hesitated before answering. He did not give details. He simply said, "Daniel is struggling again." There was a heaviness in his voice that Eleanor had never heard before. She pressed gently, reminding him that seeking help is not weakness. He nodded but looked unconvinced. He told her that Daniel had refused another rehabilitation program. He said forcing him might destroy what little trust they still had. Laura, according to Martin, believed that one more chance could make a difference. The phrase "one more chance" had become common in their home. Eleanor said she now understands how powerful that hope can be. Parents hold on to the belief that tomorrow will be different. They remember the child who once ran into their arms and believe that child is still there somewhere beneath the anger and addiction. But hope can delay hard decisions. Eleanor also revealed that there had been several heated arguments in the weeks before the tragedy. Neighbors had reportedly heard shouting late at night. Inside the house, Daniel's mood had become unpredictable. Some days he was calm and apologetic. Other days he was demanding and aggressive. Martin and Laura tried to manage the situation quietly. They avoided calling the police because they feared public scandal and legal consequences that could follow Daniel for life. Eleanor said this decision weighed heavily on them. They did not want their son labeled or imprisoned. They wanted him healed. But the tension reached a breaking point during the final week. According to Eleanor, Daniel had been asking for a large amount of money that his parents refused to give. The refusal triggered intense arguments. Laura reportedly began locking her bedroom door at night, something Eleanor described as deeply heartbreaking. No parent expects to fear their own child. Yet fear had entered that home slowly and settled there. On the final evening, what happened remains under investigation in this fictional account, but authorities confirmed that the situation escalated quickly. By the time emergency services arrived, it was too late. Eleanor believes Martin's final instinct was not self-defense but protection. She believes he tried to calm his son instead of fighting him. That belief is what brings her both sorrow and peace. She sees him not as a victim defined by violence, but as a father who never stopped loving, even when love was no longer enough. After the tragedy, the story spread quickly across news channels and social media. Headlines focused on shock and disbelief. Commentators spoke about the loss of a legendary filmmaker. Old clips of Martin Keller smiling at award shows were replayed again and again. But Eleanor felt that something important was missing from the public conversation. People were discussing fame, wealth, and legacy, yet very few were talking about addiction, fear, and family silence. In her interview, she tried to shift the focus. She said that what happened inside the Keller home was not only about one terrible night. It was about years of quiet struggle. It was about the difficulty of setting boundaries with someone you love deeply. She explained that many parents watching this story might recognize parts of themselves in Martin and Laura. They might understand the instinct to protect a child at all costs. They might understand the hope that tomorrow will bring change. Eleanor emphasized that addiction is not a simple problem. It affects behavior, judgment, and emotions. It can turn a once gentle person into someone unpredictable. But she was also careful to say that addiction does not remove responsibility. In her words, understanding pain does not excuse harm. This sentence became widely shared online because it captured the complexity of the situation. The public reaction was mixed. Some viewers praised Eleanor for her honesty. Others accused her of speaking too soon while investigations were still ongoing. A few even questioned whether private family matters should remain private. Eleanor responded calmly to critics. She said silence had already done enough damage. She believed that speaking openly might help another family make a difficult decision sooner rather than later. She also spoke about Laura, reminding everyone that mothers often carry invisible burdens. Laura had tried to act as a bridge between father and son. She attended therapy sessions, organized family meetings, and searched for treatment options. Eleanor described her as patient and hopeful, even when exhausted. According to friends, Laura once said, "If I give up on him, who will stand beside him?" That sentence now feels heavy with meaning. In the weeks following the tragedy, discussions about domestic violence against parents began appearing in newspapers and talk shows. Experts explained that while it is rarely discussed, some families experience aggression from adult children struggling with substance abuse or mental health issues. Eleanor encouraged these conversations. She said that shame keeps many families isolated. They fear judgment from neighbors, coworkers, and even relatives. As a result, they endure dangerous situations quietly. She admitted that even she did not fully understand the seriousness of what Martin was facing until it was too late. That realization filled her with regret. She wondered if pushing harder, asking more direct questions, or offering stronger advice could have changed the outcome. Yet she also acknowledged that every family must make its own choices. Looking back, she believes Martin was torn between two fears: losing his son forever or losing control of his home. In trying to prevent the first fear, he may have ignored the second. Eleanor ended this part of her interview by saying that love is powerful, but love must sometimes be firm to remain safe. She hopes that by telling this story, other families will feel less alone and more willing to seek help before tension becomes tragedy. As legal proceedings slowly began in the weeks after the tragedy, public attention shifted from shock to questions. What would happen next? Would Daniel Keller face trial? Would mental health arguments shape the outcome? Eleanor addressed these concerns carefully, reminding viewers that courts exist to examine evidence and determine responsibility. She made it clear that she was not a judge and not a lawyer. Her purpose, she said, was not to control the legal result, but to protect Martin and Laura's memory from being misunderstood. She worried that during a trial, lawyers might paint a picture of cold or controlling parents in order to defend their client. Eleanor firmly rejected that idea. She described Martin as patient to a fault and Laura as endlessly forgiving. According to her, the greatest weakness in that household was not cruelty, but hesitation. The couple hesitated to set strict limits because they feared pushing their son further away. They hesitated to involve authorities because they feared public humiliation. They hesitated to cut off financial support because they feared what Daniel might do without it. Each hesitation seemed small at the time. Together, they formed a pattern that allowed tension to grow. As media outlets speculated about possible courtroom strategies, experts began discussing how addiction and personal responsibility intersect in complex ways. Some psychologists explain that substance abuse can change behavior dramatically, but they also stressed that treatment must be accepted willingly to succeed. Eleanor agreed with that view. She said Martin had offered every resource available: therapy, private clinics, structured programs, yet Daniel often left treatment early. Hope would return when Daniel apologized and promised to change. Then disappointment followed when old habits resurfaced. Eleanor said this cycle can emotionally exhaust even the strongest families. She also spoke about the danger of image management in high-profile households. Because Martin was famous, he felt pressure to appear stable and in control. Calling emergency services or publicly acknowledging domestic conflict felt like admitting failure. That fear of judgment can silence families who most need support. Eleanor believes that if the Keller family had felt less concerned about public opinion, they might have acted sooner and more decisively. She expressed sadness that society often treats celebrity struggles as gossip instead of human crises. Behind every headline, she reminded viewers, are real people with fears and regrets. As the case moved forward, community conversations deepened. Advocacy groups began highlighting resources for parents facing aggression from adult children. Discussions about setting healthy boundaries gained attention online. Eleanor quietly supported these efforts. She did not seek fame from her interview. In fact, she declined several talk show invitations. She said enough had already been said. Her goal was simple: to honor her friend by telling a fuller story. She wanted the public to remember Martin not only as a successful filmmaker, but as a father who loved deeply